Hi, this is Anand Dharmaraj from Indie Motard. Um, I thought I'll just spend a few minutes talking about a few things that are important but mostly not done by people, which is how the engine, the frame, the wheels, all of it come together in terms of the motorcycle itself. So, if we talk specifically about what happens with a lot of motorcycles that come out of the factory, if you notice that after a couple of years, you start noticing that the bike itself it doesn't sort of gel as well as it did when you got it first. So the typical issues on this are that most people spend. Obviously, we service our motorcycles, we change the chain, sprockets, brake pads, oils, etc. But we never really bother about how the engine itself is held together in the chassis, how the wheels, the frame, all of it are all of it come together, and what you need to do to make sure that the motorcycle itself is feels all together again. And I keep repeating this all together, meaning the motorcycle itself feels sorted. You know that what it's capable of, and it behaves in a way that is predictable to you. So the first and foremost thing that I typically have done in the past is maybe about every 2 years, every 3 years, depending on what kind of riding that you do. The earlier the better if you ride it hard. If you're riding a motocross bike versus a lot of rally motorcycles versus road going versus track motorcycles, these timelines could be slightly different. So I unbolt all of the chassis bolts which attach the engine to the chassis. There is obviously you need a couple of tools. You need the right torque wrenches to put them back together, and very importantly, you need to know the sequence in which all of this is tightened and how much of torque, how much of what kind of sequence that these bolts are tightened together. You just don't start tightening up everything from the front to the back, full tight, for example. So there is a sequence which will be listed usually in your manual in terms of saying, if, for example, if it's held together in the front with two or more bolts or nuts and bolts, and similarly in the back of the chassis by two or more bolts under the engine, etc. There is a sequence that needs to be followed, and what we typically do is loosen this up, all of them, start with the sequence. So there'll be a sequence of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, how many ever bolts there are, and you go through the sequence in such a way that you get to the right torque values. And sometimes it might take you more than just directly going to a final torque value. A lot of times it will have an initial torque value, and then it'll also tell you what's the final torque value. So once you get everything in order, you one is follow the sequence, second you go through a tightening torque values, and then you go to a final torque value setting. So that in itself is about the engine and how the chassis comes together. For example, swing arm bolts, nobody really bothers to look at it because it's something that is difficult to get to, and it does require a lot of things to be removed. But those are important. The bearings inside it are usually needle bearings. They do need to be replaced. They collect a lot of rust. They do collect, it's greased and it's kept in there. It's fairly sealed. But if you do open it up, you'll start noticing that these needle bearings start to fall apart. So you do need to replace the needle bearings in the swing arm. Similarly, the T-stem bearings, that's a very, very important component. People tend to not want to spend the money on replacing the T-stem bearings. Today, you have a lot of choices from your normal ball bearings to your tapered roller bearings, which are much more precise in terms of way they behave, and you can torque it down. The fork bolts, for example, on modern bikes, the amount of torque on those are very, very little. Actually, they're almost in the range of 13 to 20 Newton meters or less. So you don't want to over tighten it because if you look at the alloys and the metals that are used today, there is a lot of very modern materials that are used. So you don't want to over tighten it. Now, if you look at the wheels itself, when I take the wheels off, I do check the bearings, the wheel bearings, I meant. Sprocket bearing, for example, and you replace them. They are not very expensive. It will go a long way because your motorcycle, when it starts to alignment issues, wobbling issues, it's not steering straight, it doesn't handle well. A lot of the basics I ignored, and people start to look at very complicated solutions for it by saying, oh, I should change the rim, I should change the fork. But first you start with the basics, and as human beings, we tend to complicate the simple things and simplify the complicated things. So I would take the wheels off. If I'm doing a tire change, just replace them. If it's 1 year old, 2 years old, just replace them. It just goes a long way in keeping your chain, your sprocket, your disc pads, your disc rotors in sync with what's happening with the front of the motorcycle with respect to the back of the motorcycle. This is my sort of take on keeping a motorcycle together. A lot of purists, for example, motocross bikes or dirt bikes, we typically tear it down to the chassis, swing arm, front forks, keep the engine still in the frame, and rebuild this whole thing in the right way. And it just feels absolutely tight right together. The motorcycle itself feels well balanced. You then have a lot more confidence. When the motorcycle starts to be wishy-washy, we all lose confidence in riding that motorcycle. It doesn't behave the same way that you want it to. So this is one of the first things that I would do if I had an older motorcycle, or if I had a new motorcycle and I've been riding it for 2 or 3, 4 years. I would definitely look into this to make our life a little more simpler. This is where I would start. So I hope this is useful, and you guys, you can buy your own tools, you can buy your own torque wrench, or obviously take it to a qualified, thing with a manual, a mechanic, or a set of hands, and go through this process. Definitely use the manual, because each motorcycle is very, very different in how the torque values are, the tightening sequences. There's been a lot of R&D put into all of this by the manufacturer, so expect to follow this, and that's something that I would really encourage all of you to do.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. I want to hear your stories, your motorcycle experiences, what you've been doing, and how motorcycles have made your life better. So if you have something to say, DM us on Instagram, and I'll be more than happy to get you on this podcast.